All right, let's dive into one of the most incredible true stories of survival you will ever hear. We're talking about a terrifying shipwreck, a crew that's given up all hope, and one man whose faith literally becomes an anchor in the storm. This is the amazing story from the 27th chapter of the book of Acts.
You know, it's a question that really pushes us to our limits, doesn't it? And this journey we're about to explore puts that question to the ultimate test. It asks, what do you hold on to when absolutely everything else is being ripped away?
Okay, so let's set the scene. Our story centers on the Apostle Paul. Now, he's a prisoner, and he's finally on his way to Rome to stand trial before Caesar. Even though God has promised he'll get there, he's still in chains under the watchful eye of a Roman centurion. So you've got this fascinating cast of characters on board. First, there's Paul, the prisoner with a divine mission. Then you have Julius, the Roman centurion in charge, who's actually surprisingly kind. And the reason we have such an incredible, detailed account is because the author Luke was right there. You'll notice he keeps saying we, because he's giving us a first-hand report from the heart of the storm. And along with them is Paul's good friend Aristarchus. This unlikely group is about to face the test of a lifetime.
And we're not talking about a small fishing boat here. They were on a huge Alexandrian grain ship. Think of it like the supertanker of the ancient world. And on this massive ship, 276 people. That's 276 souls, all about to be thrown into the same terrifying crisis.
Now, what's really interesting is that the first major conflict, the first storm they face, actually happens long before the hurricane even hits. It's a storm of belief, a clash between a warning from God and the so-called common sense of the experts.
See, it was getting late in the year, a really dangerous time to be sailing. And Paul, getting the spiritual insight, he stands up and he warns everybody. He says, "Sirs, I perceive that this voyage will be with hurt and much damage, not only of the lading and ship, but also of our lives." But, the ship's captain and its owner, they had other plans. They wanted to push on to a more comfortable port to spend the winter.
And this is where it all comes to a head. Julius, the centurion, the man in charge, he has a choice to make. Does he listen to the prisoner who's giving a warning from God? Or does he trust the seasoned professionals, the sailing experts? Well, the Bible tells us he believed the master and the owner of the ship more than those things which were spoken by Paul. He went with worldly expertise over divine wisdom.
And wouldn't you know it, at first, their decision looks like the absolute right call. A soft, gentle south wind starts to blow, and they probably thought, "See? We got this." It's so often how a bad decision begins, right? With that false sense of security.
But that gentle breeze? It was a total trap. All of a sudden, a violent hurricane-force wind, a northeaster they call the Euroclydon, just slams into them out of nowhere. All control is gone. That massive ship is now just a cork bobbing in the water, completely at the mercy of this furious storm. Can you even imagine? For 2 solid weeks, they are just driven and battered by this tempest. The sailors, they try everything they know. They're wrapping the ship with cables, they're throwing cargo overboard to lighten the load, but nothing is working, and it leads them to a place of absolute, crushing despair. This right here is one of the most chilling lines in the entire story. After days and days of not seeing the sun or the stars, with no way to navigate, Luke writes that all hope was gone. From a human point of view, it was over. They had tried everything they could possibly do, and it simply wasn't enough. But here's the thing. It's right at that moment, when all human hope is completely dead, that heaven steps in. In the dead of night, a male angel appears to Paul with a message. First, a command, "Fear not." Then, a confirmation of God's original plan, "Thou must be brought before Caesar." And finally, this incredible, mind-blowing promise. God had given Paul the lives of every single person on board. So they have this amazing promise from heaven, but now comes the hard part. Actually walking it out, believing it in the middle of all that chaos. Paul's new challenge is to lead 275 terrified people to grab hold of this promise with him. So as they get closer to land, some of the sailors totally panic. They try to secretly lower the lifeboat and just save themselves. But Paul sees what they're doing, and he warns the centurion, "Except these abide in the ship, you cannot be saved." He was making it crystal clear God's promise was for everyone, but it required their cooperation. They had to stick together. So what did the soldiers do? They cut the ropes to the lifeboat, and that was it. Everyone was in it together. And in this moment, Paul, the prisoner, becomes the true captain of that ship. He's telling everyone, "You need to eat something to get your strength back." And then he does something amazing.
He takes bread, and right there in front of all 275 people, he gives thanks to God. That single act of faith was contagious. It completely changed the atmosphere on that ship, from one of fear to one of courage.
Okay, so the ship finally crashes into a sandbar and just starts to break apart. The soldiers' training immediately kicks in. Their protocol is to kill all the prisoners so none can escape in the chaos. But Julius, the centurion, after everything he's seen from Paul, he steps in specifically to save Paul's life. And that one decision to protect one man of God ends up saving the lives of all the other prisoners too.
And here it is, the incredible finale to the story. Through all that chaos, with the ship in pieces, some people swimming, others grabbing onto planks of wood, every single person makes it safely to shore. The last line says it all. And so it came to pass that they escaped all safe to land. 276 people, the promise was perfectly fulfilled.
So you might be thinking, wow, what a crazy story. But why does this 2,000-year-old shipwreck matter for you and me today? Well, because it's basically a blueprint for how to handle the storms that we all inevitably face in our own lives.
From this whole account, we can pull out 4 spiritual anchors for our own storms. First, the anchor of listening, choosing God's guidance over the world's common sense. Second, the anchor of standing, finding a specific promise from God when hope is gone and just refusing to let go of it. Third, the anchor of leading with thanksgiving, using gratitude, just like Paul did with the bread, to change the atmosphere. And finally, the anchor of trust, remembering that God's plan to save us usually requires us to cooperate with Him.
And that really brings us all the way back to the main question. When the winds in your life start howling, when the waves are crashing, when the experts are panicking and you feel like your own strength is gone, you have a choice. Are you going to believe the report of the storm, or are you, like Paul, going to believe the report of God?